Hey guys, we are live once again. Adam and Tegan's Labor of Love.
Here we are.
If you were just watching us on another page, it was my mistake. Sorry about that.
Haven't been getting much sleep lately.
So we are in the final countdown. This was actually going to be our launch week, and it is pretty much our launch week. We're doing a soft launch, but the office is still in transition. We are putting things together. We're moving things in, hanging lights, putting in plants. It's an exciting experience. I gotta say, it's looking way better than we expected it to be.
It's a pretty spot.
It's gonna be a really beautiful, beautiful office. So we are really excited for you guys to come and see it with us. So if you're interested in coming to check it out, please let us know, and we will arrange for a tour and for a consultation, and just to have you come and see it. And you can also, of course, look forward to seeing actual pictures and maybe some 360 panoramics, which I know Facebook does really well on here.
And eventually we'll be doing more informational talks and videos and things, all from the comfort of our beautiful new offices. So
that's right.
You'll get to see them then. And we'll be having an open house too at the end of this month, which everyone will be invited to.
Yeah. So
we can show off our space and start to grow our Wheelhouse community, which we hope you all become a part of.
Yep. So you might be wondering, and I don't know, Tegan might be wondering why I suggested we do this from our kitchen today. And even though we've done it from a kitchen before, we're doing it because the subject that we're talking about today is actually really important. It's one which affects pretty much all Americans, one way or another, which is heart disease.
Yes. How to protect your heart.
How to protect your heart. And to be completely honest, we all know that the #1 effector of heart issues happens from the food we eat, right? As well as the conditions of our life, the environmental conditions and stress and behavior and so on.
But of course, lifestyle factors are one of the major reasons why people develop atherosclerosis, which is the underlying cause of all sorts of heart diseases, like having a heart attack or coronary artery disease or strokes.
Yeah. Hey Jen, hey Rachel, hey Dante, good to see you guys.
Yay,
thanks for showing up.
Thanks for joining.
So, you know, I know you and I have talked a lot about heart disease, heart issues. I have, for the past few years, been struggling with heart palpitations. And it's not dangerous. It's not anything that causes any particular problems. But it's scary. It's scary to kind of sit and feel your heart doing something weird. And the thing is, I've had it for a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what it was.
And at one point, we did think you might have had a minor heart attack.
We did think that.
Years ago.
But, you know, the thing that really kind of was shocking to me is that even when I went to a doctor and I told her, hey, I want to go to a cardiologist because I feel something weird in my chest, she told me, nah, it's indigestion. You don't need that. No. And it was because the insurance we had at the time really wouldn't cover easily.
She was just not a good doctor.
And she was also not a good doctor. Yeah.
There are some of those out there.
There are. And part of the reason that I'm mentioning that is because I think a lot of people may be dealing with cardiovascular issues and don't have them checked out for a number of different reasons.
Right. Yeah. And I would say that that's really, I would say, more of an issue for women. And I think that that's partially because, speaking at least as a woman myself, we definitely are sort of self-taught or trained to push through, right? So we're the multitaskers, and we are the ones who hold the family together, and we're the ones who are supposed to be monitoring everybody else's health and making sure everybody else is getting the right food and getting to their doctor's appointments and getting their eyeglass prescription refilled and all of that stuff. So for part of it is that women tend to brush aside symptoms when they come up. And then the other issue, well, there's a couple. One is that a lot of studies are not done on women. Most studies, when we think about pharmaceutical drugs for cardiovascular health, are done on white men. So the general awareness of whether or not treatment strategies for women are even worthwhile, you know, I mean, they're just not studied very well.
Yeah, like what kind of treatment Right.
Well, I mean,
like
I'm thinking more
medications?
about medications, yeah. That really, most studies are done on men, and so then women are kind of given like a third dose, right?
Right.
And
They
we
just
don't even
assume
know.
that you're just a
It's
weaker
never
version
been
of a
studied.
man.
We have no idea what it does,
Yeah.
right? So there's that, but then there's also the fact that things classically don't show up. Well, if we're talking about classically, we're talking about how they show up for men, right? Don't present themselves in the same way for women. So even though heart attack and cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death for women in this country, education is not so great.
It's a real problem.
It really is.
It's a real problem.
And we have a close family member who recently had an MI. She had a heart attack,
Right.
and she thought she was having jaw, neck, and back pain.
Yeah.
And she's had a lot of other, bone and, physical sort of issues. So she thought it was just an extension of that, when in fact it was something much more acutely dangerous.
Severe, yeah. And that goes to my point. And Dante here is saying that he has an enlarged heart. Dante, how did you find out about that? Can you share with us while I'm waiting for you to type in about how perhaps that happened for you? I think that goes to exactly what I was talking about, which is we have these kind of sensations, and either we tell ourselves, don't worry about it, or someone else tells us, don't worry about it, and all too often they go unchecked. And I was stunned to find out how long I was dealing with that heart condition, but also the fact that so many women are dealing with heart issues and not having them checked out because, as you said, for a number of different reasons. Not least among them is that for women it looks different than for men. The symptoms look different than for men.
Yeah.
And so not only was one of our family members, one of our grandmothers to our kids, dealing with a heart attack, but her husband didn't know what it was either. Right. Neither one of them were able to recognize that, and that's really scary.
Yeah.
So here you have really just a major issue, the number one killer, and the number one killer is a number one killer because of lack of education, lack of awareness, and I think also our attitude about it. Our attitude from the beginning, which starts with this, whether or not we're eating, too much bacon and all that good, yummy, saturated fat and salts and so on. Well,
we know though too that saturated fat is very important to have in a certain amount in your diet, and of course, me, I like prescribing personalized nutrition to everyone, so I would never tell somebody that they could only have a certain number of, milligrams of a certain type of fat in their diet just because that's what there's some heart healthy standard out there. It really has more to do with who you are personally. And I would say that one tool that I have used a lot for women in this past couple of years is this lovely cardiovascular risk diagnostic test that I do that shows me all of your lipid levels, not just your LDL, your HDL, all the basics, your cholesterols in general, but it also tells me how well you're absorbing all of the different omega fatty acids, and which ones you're deficient in, how much you have, and if you have too much, whether or not you're getting too many hydrogenated oils in your diet, the saturated fatty acid index, so we know whether or not you're eating too much of that or not enough, maybe even in some cases, because some people come in with like super fat-free diets and they have all sorts of skin and hormonal issues and all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really cool test because we can also see how well you're absorbing fats out of your diet, because for some people, fat-soluble vitamin deficiency is a real concern, and for some people, they're absorbing too much fats out of their diet. And then I can tell you specifically what kinds of fats you're overabsorbing.
Can you also tell us what happens when that happens?
When you overabsorb fats?
Overabsorb fats.
Well, there's a couple of things that happen. One is that they can be lodged in the tissues because we have these macrophages that are part of our immune system that like to eat fat when they get triggered by certain things. One of which is a molecule called TMAO, which actually our gut microbiota make for us in a large part. So oftentimes if people come in with cardiovascular risks, I modulate what's living in their intestines so that they don't have too many TMAO producing microbiota, because that actually stimulates the macrophages, which are these little eating cells that are part of our immune system, to gobble up fat and then to sort of lodge themselves on our artery walls, which is what becomes atherosclerotic plaques, right? They're called foam cells. They're obese immune cells, which is really wild.
Yeah.
And then the other.
And not everybody has that.
No.
Right? Not everybody has TMAO. The same.
Producing microbiota. Yeah. But that's like the big scare about eggs, right? So choline is one of the main causes, or one of the main food sources for microbiota that make TMAO. So it's like, well, if you eat eggs, you're going to get heart disease. But if you modulate the intestine so that you're not making a lot of TMAO, then you can eat eggs.
So you
and
can
you're
eat
not
eggs.
going to get cardiovascular.
So some people, it's actually a really positive thing to eat eggs.
Yeah.
So if someone's coming to you, how would they figure out, what would they expect in order to figure out whether or not they can eat eggs, what they can eat, what would be a typical kind of heart-healthy diet for them? Because if I'm understanding correctly in terms of what you're saying, is the idea of just a heart-healthy diet doesn't really cut it. In order to be heart healthy, you need to really be much more specific.
Right. Well, I mean, there are mass studies that show that certain types of eating habits predispose to less risk of heart disease. So that's, of course, going to be true for all of us, because, you know, if you eat a diet of French fries and hamburgers and pizza, and you don't exercise, then you're much more likely to have a risk of a heart attack or atherosclerotic plaques that lead to cardiovascular issues of other types, like strokes and things, than if you eat lots of fruits and vegetables and fresh fish and grains that keep your blood sugar in balance and all that stuff. So sure, there's general guidelines that are going to help everybody stave off heart disease. That doesn't stop a significant portion of the population from continuing on into heart disease. I have patients who say, I have flax in my diet, I eat oatmeal for breakfast, I have a quarter of an avocado on my salad every day, I use organic cold pressed olive oil, and yet I still have hypertriglyceridemias, or I have high cholesterol. And a lot of times when that happens, their MDs will say, well, you have a genetic risk. We think you have a genetic predisposition for high cholesterol, and so there are certain drugs that you can take to lower your internal production in the liver of your cholesterols, and that's going to help you from having a heart attack later in life. Sometimes that's true, but it's not always true, because I've done testing that shows that people are actually hyperabsorbers of the good fats. So they actually need to cut down some of the flaxseed oil that they put in their smoothies every morning, and the avocados that they eat, and all the rice bran, and all of this stuff that's really high.
Everything that Shape magazine is telling you.
Right,
you're
and
supposed
plant
to be eating
sterols, plant fats can also be a problem. And adding certain types of fibers to the diet can then cut that down. But it really is an individualized way of managing heart health that can sustain people's heart from going in the wrong direction in that population that just sort of the general guidelines aren't going to cut it.
Right.
Does that answer your
question? It totally answers my question. You know, and the thing that like really, you know, strikes me most is the genetic component of it, particularly because my grandfather died of heart disease. My mother has had a stroke. I have palpitations. And I'm watching, you know, my daughter is a pescatarian. My son is a pizzatarian, or
He's a bacon-tarian.
Yeah.
He likes bacon of all forms.
He might actually be a pastafarian. But you know, so I'm really concerned about like being able to clue into the things that I know are going to be good for me and that are going to not be so good for me from a diagnostic perspective. I mean, I know kind of like the things experientially that I should not be eating, like certain things that are going to kick off the palpitations. But I love being able to kind of have a map that shows exactly what I should be doing, what I shouldn't be doing. And I think that's so critical. That's such a missing piece, which I think precision medicine is starting to just kind of touch on, you know, or get into that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, people definitely come in and say, you know, I have a strong family history on both sides, or just one side of death from heart-related issues. And there are a lot of things that we can address in terms of genetic risk for heart conditions. There's congenital issues, meaning you might just be predisposed to growing more neuronal connections in the heart tissue than others. And I do have a population of people who end up with AFib as they get older, or other arrhythmias that do predispose you, well, set you in a higher risk category for things like developing clots and stroke. So there is that, but then there's also really sort of generalized genomic risks that we can assess, and then they're really actionable. So there are things like certain enzymes in the liver that play certain roles in either shuttling cholesterols from tissues, making cholesterol. That's a big one that we look at. There are all sorts of stress response related things that we often can address for people that increase their arrhythmias. So, I mean, that's part of it for you. One of the ways that we at least started to reduce some of it was getting your oxygenation up, because that was a really big issue for you.
Right.
So that's...
Boy, that was fun.
Yeah.
I'm now on a CPAP.
Yeah.
which if you don't know, is a machine that you wear at night to help you breathe and not snore. It forces air down in your throat. It was a scary concept to think that, you know, for 7 hours out of the night, my brain and my heart was not getting proper oxygen.
And it was showing too.
And it was showing.
You were fatigued and exhausted.
Foggy-headed.
You couldn't run on the treadmill anymore, and you were like vital in your early 40s, a very athletic person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal.
Yeah. And what's scary about, you just mentioned being in the 40s. I'm starting to have friends now who are having heart attacks in their 40s. I had last year and the year before, I each had a friend die from a heart attack, which was stunning to me. Now, granted, when I look back to their Facebook pictures, there's tons of pictures of steak and whiskey and partying and so on and so forth. Not to say that that's what causes it, but
the partying causes it.
But all of that together, and as you're talking about, there's lifestyle, there's dietary. You know, I think there's also your emotional. You know, all of it together really adds to it, and I think it's, you know, it can be really challenging for us to figure out, well, what do I address? What do I take care of first? How do I begin, you know, this entire journey of taking care of myself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say if you've gotten to a place in your life where whatever the symptoms are that you're having, or the fears about symptoms that might develop that you're having, your diet's always the place to start in my book.
Yeah.
Because by affecting change in your digestive system, you're communicating with your neurologic system, you're communicating with your immune system, which is obviously the inflammatory responses that we have in the body. You are supporting all of your organ systems by providing the nutrients that those organ systems need to function correctly. So food comes first.
Right.
I mean, that it really is just the way of it. I've had people with hypertension, and they write down hypertension as their chief complaint, and then once I get to know them, they only poop twice a week, and they sleep 2 hours a night. And then when I get them sleeping and going to the bathroom regularly, they don't have hypertension anymore. And they've been on meds for 10 years for it. You know, so there's all sorts of ways that sort of integral how you care for yourself on a daily basis component of thinking about your food and feeding your belly appropriately and having that belly full.
Right. Jen out there.
Yeah, shout out to my girl Jen. Feeling full, belly full.
Feeling full.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So food is first, but food does not necessarily meet every need for every person. So I do have people who come in and say, well, isn't my diet enough? For some people, it's just not. And those are people where there's been some kind of a functional change in their body, whether they were born with it or they developed it. So, for instance, if you have an enlarged heart and you have palpitations, just changing your diet isn't necessarily going to be the only way that we're going to have to support you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
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 Well, you know, I know when we talk about the heart, we're usually talking about the physical heart, but the other type of heart we often talk about is kind of our soul, our spiritual heart.
Right. How do you take care of that part?
How do you take care of your own heart from that perspective, which is, you know, directly linked, I think, quite honestly.
Yeah. I have patients who say, well, I had to wear a heart monitor for a month, and the first week I was so nervous about what they were going to find and so scared and not sleeping well, and so they called me halfway through the week and they told me that I had terrible palpitations and I needed to come in right away.
Right.
And then once that part was over, my palpitations went away because I had gotten over like it had been confirmed that I was going to have that type of experience. And then the rest of the month I didn't have any palpitations at all.
Right. Right.
So of course that, like, you know, I was touching on managing sort of the underlying way in which we respond to stress, whether it's thoughts that we're having that are
Mm-hmm.
creating stress, or
Mm-hmm.
whether they're external experiences that cause stress.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes,
Right.
that's like a major component of taking care of both of our, it's the connection. That's what I was trying to say. The connection between the physical heart health and our soul.
And the soul, right. And you know, I know one of the things that we've had to kind of both face this year is dealing with parents who have had heart conditions. And, you know, it's a challenge because it's something that you're not really trained into. You know, no one really talks to you about, hey, at some point you're going to have to start worrying about your parents in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, and it goes alongside this whole idea that we're not educated about heart issues, the physical heart issues. You know, it all kind of just seems to happen. We're at a point now, our family, where all four of our mother figures are dealing with some form of cardiovascular something, each in their own way. And
yeah, and for us personally, we're in that. We're trying to remember the name of the term, so somebody let us know if they can think of it. But that, I don't know, it's like a sandwich generation, or I don't know what you call it, when you have moved into that phase of your adult life where you're still caring for your own kids, and then you're also starting to think about what it means to take care of your parents too, or you're fully moved into that for some people. And you know, that's a tricky spot, because I would say personally for myself, it rends open this whole new layer of vulnerability, just sort of like energetic vulnerability, because I'm still thinking about how to take care of my kids, and there's at least some part of me in my brain that thinks, well, there's elders that are going to be there to direct my actions in some way. There's elders that we can call when we don't know what's going on.
Right.
You know, and then there's this phase where that starts to change, and they call us and they say, this thing is happening. What do we do for this? How are we going to fix this? How am I going to get help for what's happening for me? And so it turns into this kind of caring and supporting and advisory role in both directions.
Yeah.
And so I thought it would be kind of cool, since we're talking about heart health today. And I don't know how well I just explained things, but we were wanting to talk a little bit about just the fact that, especially for women, the symptoms are not necessarily that classic businessman in a suit having a heart attack in a midtown cafe, right? It's more, my arm, whoa. Yeah.
I mean, it's dramatically different.
Yeah, it could be nausea, it could be jaw pain, it could be super shortness of breath, right? It could be really, so all you ladies out there, just keep that in mind.
As well as you husbands, and then and family members. I mean, I think it's really important that everyone go out right now and just kind of Google what some of the symptoms are for stroke and for myocardial infarctions. I always mix that up. Farctions, not farctions.
Yeah.
Heart attacks.
Right.
You know, and really kind of just familiarize yourself with that, because, like I said, number one reason that it becomes a killer is because of the lack of education for it. So anyway, I didn't.
So I just thought it'd be kind of cool to pair that with a conversation about how we protect our own hearts when we are caretaking for other people who are either ill or aging or having, kids. Kids. You're always taking care of kids.
We've got Jess up there who just became a new mom, and she's got a little tiny heart that she's in charge of now.
Right. So, and that's your wheelhouse, my dear.
Yeah.
So, do you have advice for me, because I'm in that position? Do you have advice for our lovely friends and colleagues and patients and clients who are out there? Like, what are some ways in which you can keep your sort of energetic and spiritual heart safe and healthy and protected in a situation where you're having to actively care for other people on a daily basis?
I think one of the things that's really challenging is that we often don't know when we're overdoing it. So I often tell people, create some kind of visual for yourself. What if it was taking care of your mother or taking care of a loved one, what would that look like? Is it perhaps a glass, and that glass has water pouring into it? And if you suddenly have to check in, what does that glass look like? Is it overflowed? Are you not able to handle it anymore? Is it not full enough? Is it full of boiling water? I mean, you can kind of get senses from where you are internally through your unconscious mind by using imagination and using imagery. I think one of the other things that's really important is just like our heart, our physical heart is in direct connection with our brain and is part of the autonomic thing that's happening back and forth. They're speaking to each other. Same thing is happening with our minds and our spiritual heart. You know, there's a conversation that's happening between the two of them, which is why on the back of my business card, there's a picture of a skull and there's a picture of a heart, because those two things are constantly, you know, within our in our vision, and we are constantly being influenced by those two things. So it's important when we're thinking about taking care of people that we're not just kind of following our intuition or just being too headstrong about it. Which when we go into a hospital, that's kind of what we want to do. You know, we start looking at labs and data and everything else, and then we get scared. And so then we react, you know, one other way, and we sometimes lose sight of that conversation. So I like to tell people, so let's create an action plan for how you're going to do this. You know, what is it going to look like to take care of your family member? What are the things that you need out of it? And then check in emotionally. How does that feel? On a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with that? How does that make you feel like you've gotten what you need? And if I get like a 6 or a 7, I'm like, well, then what is it that you need to make it an 8 or a 9 to really feel good about what you're doing? And when they can kind of have that relationship, then they can always check in with that, you know? So I know there were times when I was sitting by my mom's bedside when she had a stroke, and I was like, this is just way too much, you know, and I could feel that I was at like an 11 and a 12. And all it meant was I had to just go for a walk. You know, I needed to literally clear my head with fresh oxygen. I needed to clear my head metaphorically, and I needed to release my heart from some of that, as opposed to just being in one space or another, you know. And so I say that because I think it's important for us all to remember that we have that as part of your makeup. That is part of your wiring. There is a conversation happening between the head and the heart, and I like to think something bigger. But if you don't subscribe to that, that's fine as well. That's fine as well. But the information for you is there, just like the information is on the internet for you to find out about how to care for your heart physically. And even
I would say what's on the internet are good lists of symptoms.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
that's what I meant. If you want to care for your heart, there's one place that you should go, and that's here. We want you to come. Contact us at Wheelhouse. Doesn't mean you have to actually come in, but reach out to us and let us know. Say, hey, I've had some thoughts, or I've always wanted to explore this, or I have a question. You know.
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk for a few minutes on the phone if people are curious,
email.
I can answer emails. And certainly if you have a family history of cardiovascular risks, if it's not me, find somebody good to work with, because you really can live a really healthful life if you've got good guidance. And just as I was just thinking as Adam was talking, well, it would have never occurred to me to come up with a visual to sort of monitor my level of over-the-topness. And I can't imagine not having somebody in my life that would suggest things like that. Right. So just like you need a good practitioner to help you guide sort of through the morass of information out there and figure out a way of keeping yourself healthy, I think having a coach is really ideal.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm here, process cognition coach. Process cognition helps. It's exactly that type of thing. It's figuring out what way of thinking works best for you. But it's, as we were just talking about, it's not all in the head, it's in the heart as well. So from that, you know, I also want to extend our heart out to a family, part of the construction team for Wheelhouse, one of the lead electricians, unfortunately, right over this weekend had a stroke. And I know how hard that is for his family, and for him, he's okay, from what I understand. But from all of us at Wheelhouse, we want to just extend our love and support out to them. And and to anyone else out there who may be listening, who's having a hard time or, you know, challenged with taking care of a loved one or even with themselves. Dante, I see that you wrote something, and I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to read it. I promise that we will answer it. Thank you for being such a part of this conversation. And guys, thank you for showing up for Adam and TEGAN'S Labor of Love. When you see us next week, It's going to be exciting because we will be broadcasting from the actual offices, from Wheelhouse Plaza.
Yeah, we will be officially open for business next Monday, October 10th, and we hope to see you all there.
All of you, every single one, because if you don't, we're going to show up in your living room. Yeah,
That's
Bye, guys.
All right, bye.
It's good seeing you.